Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the episode of PLA with myself, Nick, and Bruno. We've got two questions today for you guys, and the first one is just regarding interest rates and deposits. That will be out to Nick, and the second one is obviously with Bruno. This one is regarding installment sale agreements. Nick, so the first question is as follows. It comes from Denise, and the question is, what is a fair interest rate for a deposit amount held on behalf of a tenant? And just some background there is said that they have been told, right, that we have been told that 1% in a trust account. Yet the managing agents are not willing to send us a bank statement detailing those earnings due to the interest being charged by their payment system info directly from the bank. Therefore, because of that, it is apparent that they only being provided with a statement with the company logo of the agent. How would we know if their figures are then correct? Nick?
Okay, perfect. So just dealing with deposits on lease agreements. Okay, the first thing I want to just make clear is I'm going to be talking about residential lease agreements specifically, okay, because there is legislation dictating exactly how deposits are supposed to be held and what happens with them in terms of residential properties. Okay, when it comes to your commercial, industrial, all of those I'm going to leave aside because those are commercial transactions, and so those are going to depend on what the parties agree to in terms of a particular contract. So this is only going to apply to residential. We just haven't been told what kind of property this is, but I presume it is residential. So in terms of the Rental Housing Act, deposits can be paid on a residential property. The landlord is entitled to ask for a deposit, okay? And any deposit that is paid from the tenant to the landlord must be invested in an interest-bearing account with a registered financial institution. Okay. So if the landlord is going to ask for a deposit, they also don't have to do this. They can form another, get another form of security. But if they do, it must be registered with a registered financial institution in an interest-bearing account. Okay. So the requirement, that is the requirement in terms of legislation. Legislation does not go so far as to indicate what is the percentage that you should get back on your deposit ultimately. So while it must accrue interest, okay, legislation doesn't dictate what that type of interest percentage is. So to answer the question, Denise has asked, well, what's a fair interest rate? Okay. A fair interest rate is basically what your lowest amount you're going to get in a basic account with any registered financial institution is. Okay. Usually that's going to be your 2-3%, something to that effect. What is more interesting about this question, but unfortunately I'd have to look into the facts a bit deeper, is you as a tenant are entitled to ask for proof of your deposit in that interest-bearing account. And in this particular circumstance, it seems that there's an indication that the money is being held in trust. So there is a question there that I have about how is that money actually being held and how is that interest percentage being levied? Because I'm not sure whether this is a circumstance where the managing agents have not necessarily invested it into an interest-bearing account and they're trying to just do the equivalent of giving a percentage that they deem to be appropriate in the circumstances. And in that circumstance, the managing agents have to be careful because the requirement is into an interest-bearing account with a registered financial institution. You can't hold it in any other way and just say, I'm giving you a percentage and that's sufficient. Legislation actually requires the investment into the bank and interest to accrue on that particular thing. But as I say, we don't have that information. I would, if I was Denise, continue to insist that I need to see it. This growth in the deposit from a banking institution to know that my money is there and that legislation has been complied with. So unfortunately, I can't give you a correct percentage. There is none. Legislation doesn't go that far. But you should really insist on them demonstrating that they have invested it into the interest-bearing account.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, then Nick. And then Bruno, we'll be jumping into the installment sale agreement question. This is at the back end of one of the videos that we did regarding the rights of a purchaser to access the seller's bond information. And the follow-up question from one of the viewers is whether is it possible to basically buy a property with an installment sale agreement and actually then sell it to someone else under basically the similar terms, Bruno?
It's a very interesting story. It's actually a personal deal that I was involved in, where we managed to buy a property and sell it without putting any money down or very little money down. And this was when we leveraged the use of installment sale agreements, and then managed to find a buyer who was willing to buy the property and actually rent it out from us, using a lease with an option to later buy this property. And effectively, what happened here was we bought the property, we were paying off in installments, we were entitled to place a tenant on the property, and the tenant was able to cover the bond. And by covering the bond, it meant that we didn't have to put any money down. And this tenant would, after a period of time, be able to buy the property and utilize the payments they had made in the meantime in order to reduce the purchase price from having on-sold it. Now, this isn't always possible. It's not an easy thing to do. This opportunity just arose once, and it was very easy to take this opportunity. But how this typically works is that an installment sale agreement is exactly what it sounds. You buy a property over a period of time, has to be 13 months, has to be over 3 installments or more. So that's a very easy way of looking at installment sale agreements. Now, how to get into installment sale agreements is sometimes tricky because sellers want their cash immediately. But sometimes you find that there's a need, and if you're able to cater for this need, then you might not necessarily have to pay the full purchase price. So, for example, if the seller is in dire need of an amount of money right now that they need in order to pay their debts off, and you're able to provide this amount of money, which is often the case, then they're happy to sell the property, even if it is in installments and even if it is spread out over a period of a year, especially if you're offering the purchase price that they're looking to obtain and you're able to service their debt. And in the particular story that I expressed, we knew of a tenant that was very interested in buying this property, but the reason they couldn't buy it immediately was because they were foreign national, they weren't able to get bonds from the bank. So he's building up cash reserves in order to be able to buy the property cash, but he wanted to live in it. So we negotiated that we took occupation of this property, we managed it, we serviced absolutely everything, we maintained it, we took very good care of the property, and as long as we were allowed to place a tenant on the property, and we utilized the income from this tenant in order to cover the bond. The seller was very happy because now he had no monthly liabilities relating to the property. We were very happy because we actually managed to find a tenant for the property. The seller didn't mind. He was well aware because he didn't have the patience or the energy to manage tenants or manage property. So we actually stepped in to assist him, as it were, on his behalf. And this tenant had a certain period of time to exercise their option to buy the property off the back of this lease. If they didn't, the rental was basically accrued to us. It would never have to be repaid. And if they did exercise their option, then so be it. They would be entitled to reduce the purchase price, which for us worked out financially. It was very easy to do this calculation. So yes, it is possible to basically do a back-to-back on an installment sale agreement. And in fact, it is possible to do it on very similar terms. Doing 2 installment sale agreements back-to-back isn't possible because of the deeds office and the registration of the contract in the deeds office. But if you structure it the way that I just explained, it might work very, very well.
Yeah, okay, yes. Thank you very much. That does then cover those 2 questions for today. One on deposits and interest rates, and the second one, obviously, on installment sale agreements. And that does bring us to the end of today's 2 questions and answers. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you guys again next week, Wednesday.
Thanks,
Well,
guys.
thanks, guys.